So first of all, I just wanted to say something about the vision of the centre, very, very briefly, in a way, just to start by stating the vision, or just to start by sort of putting that there. So that's kind of in the picture. The kind of conversation is going on around that vision. So I wanted to cite a book which has been quite influential on me. The book is called Buddhism is a Religion and You Can Believe It. Yeah, Buddhism is a Religion and You Can Believe It. It's by a man called David Brazier, who he's a British, Western Buddhist, and he founded a particular Buddhist movement. It's very small, actually, called the Amida Trust. And it's one of those book titles that is a bit polemical. A lot of the message of the book is in the title. So he's having a bit of a pop at another book, which was by a very well-known, prominent Buddhist called Stephen Batchelor, highly respected, very, very intelligent commentator on Buddhism. But he wrote a book called Buddhism Without Beliefs, which is quite a best-selling book on Buddhism. Actually, I think in many ways a good book and was a way into Buddhism for many, many people. So I don't want to sort of come down on that book too much. I think there's a lot that's good in it. But anyway, David Brazier was taking issue with Buddhism without beliefs. He was saying, no, Buddhism is a religion and you can believe it. Yeah. And what he means by religion is, so he says it in the book, he says, look, Buddhism is not a way of life. Buddhism is not just a philosophy. Buddhism is not a system of ethics. Buddhism is not a set of meditation practices. Of course, it has all those things, but that's not essentially what Buddhism is. Yeah, Buddhism is not a kind of culture. Buddhism is not a kind of society or civilization. It may inspire a better society or a better civilization, but that's not what Buddhism is. Yeah, what Buddhism is the kind of bigger thing or the deeper thing that inspires all those other things. Yeah, all those other things are just an expression, are just a manifestation of something else. Yeah, and he uses this metaphor of a pole star. Yeah, a kind of bright shining star in the sky, which you follow, which you can orientate your life by, and which, if you follow it, it will take you in the right direction. Yeah, and then you'll then meet other people going in the right direction, and amazing things can happen, and you can it gives a kind of orientation which then allows so many other things to kind of flower and happen. Yeah. So the pole star is the Buddha, awakening, enlightenment, wisdom and compassion, the bodhicitta. It gets expressed in many, many different ways. Nirvana. It gets expressed in many, many different ways in the Buddhist tradition. But there's something sort of beyond, as it were, in quote marks. There's something deeper or more profound. That's what it really is. Yeah, it's people orientating their lives towards that, which changes everything. Yeah, if you haven't got that, you just have a whole load of people, milling about. Well, just look at the world, look at politics, look at a lot of culture. There's no pole star. Yeah. There's nothing kind of drawing people kind of up beyond themselves, as it were. And everything just reduces down to an extraordinary kind of superficial level. Yeah. So that's our job. That's our vision, I feel, is to allow the pole star, the star, to shine bright. And we do that by orientating our lives towards it, each of us individually and collectively, more and more over the months, over the years, turning our minds, turning our hearts, turning our lives towards the Buddha, towards awakening, moving towards the pole star. So that's the Dharma, the path, the teaching, and then doing it together, doing that with each other, meeting others on the path and moving forwards. That's the Sangha. So that's our job, to provide that, so that other people can start to find that, so that other people can come here and feel like there's something going on here. There's something kind of different which is orientating these people's lives and which makes a difference. Yeah. And that will manifest in different ways, classes, events, but they're the manifestation, they're the expression. There's something else, which is the kind of essential thing, as it were. So that's our vision, that's our job, to orientate our lives towards awakening in that kind of way. Yeah. And then that will help others who come into contact with that, who are also looking, even if they don't realize it yet, they will sense there's something here which I can orientate towards, and that will really help me live my life, as it were. Yeah. So that's the vision. And now I just want to say a bit about where I think we've got to with that vision. Yeah. So I'm just going to tell the story a little bit personally. So I came here 4 years ago. I've been working at the Buddhist Center, about 4.5 years ago now, actually. And before that, I had 5 years living what I call a homeless life. So I was traveling around, visiting different centers, usually for about 6 weeks at a time, doing Dharma teaching, also doing some writing of books. It was a really wonderful phase of my life, actually. But one of the places I used to visit was Croydon. So Dharma Shri, if anyone knows Dharma Shri, she's a canny thing. And she persuaded me to come to Croydon. It wasn't generally what I was doing. I was mostly going to places where there was only one alderman. That was my vision, was to support very small fledgling situations. So I thought, well, why is Croydon? That's been around for years. They've got loads of alder members. Anyway, she persuaded me. So one of the places on my yearly kind of road tour, as it were, was Croydon. So I started coming into relationship with this place, this centre and this community. And I enjoyed coming here. And I suppose an impression started to build up, was that, the centre had been going a long time. And it had been through different phases, it had very, very successful phases. It was once, one of the probably 2 biggest centres in the movement. It's had quite difficult phases. And the time I was coming on, there was a few sort of people who'd been holding it for a long time. So, probably particularly Vajragupta, Amra Pushpa, and Dharma Shri. They'd been doing it for a long, long time, and they were just heroically keeping it going, incredibly loyal. I'm sure there are others as well, so sorry if I miss out names that I should mention. It's just difficult to mention everybody, but yeah, they'd really been keeping it going. And I think on the women's side, things were going very well. But in other ways, it was a bit flat. The men's side was particularly, how can I put it politely, dire. Very, very few men involved. But a lovely Sangha, a really good bunch of people, very mature Sangha. So I started to come into relationship with this, and I kind of liked it. And it was near where I grew up. And I just started to get a sense of potential. There's a bunch of people here, they'd really like to do something. They've got this amazing place on the high street. They've got this massive house in Purley, which was a bit stuck and, full of people who were disconnected from the centre, mostly. I had this sense of potential, yeah? And I had this sense of a small, good bunch of people who could really do something, yeah? And then on my last visit, I came and I had the same impression, but something had changed, where you could feel a new team was aligning. So Moksha Darshini had become the women's Mitra convener. That had already happened. And I was already dead impressed with her. I'd seen her at work in the shop, and I just thought, she is class. She really gets it. So I was already, I already knew that. And then she become or was about to become the women's Mitra convener. Then I had this conversation in the restaurant over the road with the person who was going to become Kalyana Nara. He was just about to go off to be ordained. And we had what was for me a very important conversation where we just talked. And it was clear when he came back, even though he hadn't even been ordained yet, he was already thinking, how can I help change Croydon and really kind of make a contribution. There were others as well. There was Pranyanandi. There was you just got a sense of a kind of new team emerging. And then I got asked again, probably the Canny, the Dharma Shri, and the Canny Vijaya Shri. They said, "Can you come to Croydon?" And in a way, I didn't want to. I was having a lovely life, traveling around the world, writing books, but partly I knew I could be more effective if I was in one place. Partly I thought, I've hopefully got time for one more big project. And probably if I go in one place, that will be more effective. And I just responded to what was here. I could see the potential. I could see really good people. So I came along. So Moksha Darshini was there. I joined in January 2020 and quite soon became the chair of the centre. And then Kalyana Nara became the men's mitra convener. And then actually about 6 months after that, we managed to attract Viryadeva. That was a real coup. He was being headhunted left, right and centre, but we got him. This very, very strong, amazing new team started to emerge. And we basically did a lot of revisioning the centre. There was a lot that was a bit stuck. There was a lot that needed to change. A lot changed, and things have really happened. Things have really, Aryatara is completely different. The men's Buddhist community is now a men's Buddhist community. We've had about 30 people become mitras in the last 4 years. We've got about 25 people training for ordination now. Men and women. And I think there's just been a real kind of buzz around the centre, and a lot of people have come in, and it's just delightful seeing people change, seeing people kind of get that sort of pole star and kind of starting to have something which they can orientate their lives towards and which draws out the best in them, which draws out their potential. It's been really delightful just seeing that in more and more people, and seeing people change, seeing people become more and more themselves. Yeah. So we've actually, part of that happened during the pandemic. Do you remember that? I got here and about 6 weeks later, we were in a lockdown. So I went to look after my mum. So, oh God, it was so bizarre, wasn't it? That time, basically helping to run a Buddhist centre on an iPad. So weird when you think about it now, and very, very strange time. But I think we did incredibly well, and I think we managed to turn it into an opportunity. And a lot of good things came out of that for the centre. Anyway, there's not time to tell you the whole story. So now I just want to bring the story more up to date. So I think there's been a real buzz, and I think something really amazing has happened. And my sense is the buzz has sort of declined a bit in the last while, maybe the last 6 months or so, a bit hard to say exactly when. And we've noticed it's got a bit harder to attract newer people to the centre. We are still getting a little flow of new people, but it's much less than it was, say, a couple of years ago. Yeah. So this has been a little bit of a concern for us in the core team, and we've been talking about this a bit. And well, I've got 5 things that I think are going on. So just very, very briefly want to share those with you. And then we're going to talk about 2 of them this week. We're going to focus on 2 of them. Yeah. So one is, I think partly it's just when it's new, it's really exciting. And now we've been doing it for a few years. It's a bit, it's just not so exciting in the same kind of way. Yeah. I think there's just a kind of, it doesn't stay exciting for ages. Or in a way, putting that more positively, I think a whole wave of people have come in. They've become mitras. Some of them are now training for ordination. So there's been a kind of deepening. I think there's something more kind of deep and substantial going on. But that has a certain effect. It might mean that people are going for refuge group, their ordination training group, or they're in their weekly study group, rather than coming to the big Sangha events. Do you see what I mean? So there's a kind of way in which although you've got more people and although they're going deeper, it can feel a bit more dispersed, if that makes sense. Yeah. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is I think in the core team we worked incredibly hard for 4 years. Yeah. Looking after my mum whilst running a Buddhist centre that had a lot of problems on my iPad. It was challenging. They were difficult times, and I've no complaints about it. I've absolutely loved what I've done, and I'm very happy. But it's drawn a lot out of us for quite a while. So I think there's a kind of issue of sustainability. We realise we've got to do it in a sustainable way because I probably need to be chair for another 4 years at least. Maybe a bit longer. And part of the reason for that is we're very, very focused on succession. Yeah. So, there wasn't a chair set for 7 years before me. There was a kind of break in the lineage, as it were. And that has an effect. If there's no leadership, it has an effect. The same thing with the men's mitra convener. There was a gap where there was no men's mitra convener. The women have done much better. They've always managed to kind of hand on the women's mitra convener. But in other areas, there was kind of gaps in the succession, as it were. We're aware it's the order in Croydon is ageing. Yeah. So that the shocking statistic that I quote, which is now not true anymore because of Gambhira Leela getting ordained, is so I was the second. I'm 56. I'm the second youngest order member in Croydon. The only one younger than me was Vajragupta. Now, luckily, we've got Gambhira Leela, who's I think 41. Yeah, but even so, yeah, most of the order members are in their late 60s, 70s, 80s. Yeah. So there's a kind of issue of succession that really we want to. My ideal is that when I hand on to an order member much younger than me. Yeah, that the centre gets handed on to a new generation. And there's still a lot of work to make that happen. It's possible, it can happen, but it won't happen through wishful thinking. We've got to kind of make it happen. We've got to be kind of focused on that and make that happen. Yeah. So there's an issue of sustainability and succession. Have I sort of evoked that? Do you kind of get that? Yeah. And just one more thing about that. It's a bit like we've had this kind of wave of inspiration and buzz and people coming in. And now we're kind of got a relatively small group of order members and people running the activities for the first wave. And now we've got to bring in the second wave. Yeah, do you see like how to do that in a sustainable way? You've already done one thing, you've been doing it for 4 years, you've got to carry on looking after these people. And there's a need to bring a new wave of people in. Yeah. So yeah, just how we do that in a sustainable way. That's factor number 2. Factor number 3, I think Croydon is not in a good way, is it? And I wonder whether some people don't like coming to Croydon, particularly in the evenings, maybe. So I don't want to exaggerate that because actually, if you go over to the Games Cafe, it's packed out. There's plenty of people who are quite happy to come to Croydon. So I don't think it's the explanation, but it may be a factor. Yeah, and it's one that we can't do so much about, although maybe there are a few things we can do about that. Yeah. The last 2 factors are the ones that I'd like us to kind of focus on today. So one is our publicity. Say something about that in a moment when Esty comes up. And then the 5th one is to do with the sort of themes and topics that we and the courses, the kind of themes and topics that we've been having. Yeah. So for a while, I'll just very, very briefly introduce this now, and then I'll say more later when we go into the groups and talk about this. For a while, we deliberately sort of went high end. We had quite a lot of quite sort of radical, challenging topics. Yeah, my mind's going to go blank now and not be able to remember them. But we had those talks by Vajragupta. We had Vajragupta presenting quite sort of kind of high level material. We had courses on dhyanas, higher states of consciousness. We deliberately sort of aimed high, as it were. Yeah. And the reason we did that was there's a sort of danger for Buddhism, I think, in the West that it's an opportunity and a danger. Buddhism's got a very good reputation, and people, I think, are quite open and sympathetic to Buddhism. But they may have quite a sort of, they've got a particular idea of what it is. Yeah. So there's a danger when you're teaching that you can end up watering it down, that it just becomes about, being a bit more positive, being a bit calm. You can end up presenting it in quite a kind of secularized, you've got the whole world of secular mindfulness, all that's out there, and all that kind of colors what people think of Buddhism. It's not that there's anything wrong with that. Obviously, for many, many people, that's incredibly helpful and positive. I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying our job is the pole star. Our job is something different. Yeah. If we do the pole star, those people can benefit as well. Those people can come along and get something, but you need enough people who are also doing this. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. That's our job. And it's very, very easy when you're up front and you're doing a lunchtime class, say, and there's a few people there, they've just come along to meditate. You gradually sort of water it down. Yeah. And then it just won't attract anyone. It hasn't got that other thing. Yeah. So we deliberately went high end, but I wonder whether we went a bit too high end for a bit too long, and whether there's a kind of middle way somehow. Yeah. Of finding themes and approaches which are kind of radical and which are very much about the Dharma, but are also really kind of relevant to people's lives, relevant to kind of what's going on out there, really helping people change their lives.